Okay. Now, like this is a very interesting topic, and I think so it's very relevant also in day-to-day clinical practice. Communication with colleagues and staff. This is a skill. Actually, it's a skill, and you need some time to acquire this skill. But it is better that the earlier you start this practice of communication with the colleagues and staff, the better it is for you as you grow in your clinical specialty. Now, just to begin with, I will like to just discuss a case scenario which I have got from one of the textbooks. During an admission for pneumonia, an elderly man was found to have heme positive stools and an iron deficiency anemia. He was dehydrated, had a low serum potassium, and the patient was on digoxin elderly for some chronic AF or something, and he had an elevated digoxin level. Now, an order was placed for a gastroenterology consult because he had anemia and he was having blood in occult blood in stools. Now, without communicating with the referring physician, the specialist comes, he evaluates the patient, and he schedules a colonoscopy with his entire team. Now, the patient is shifted for colonoscopy without informing the primary physician. And during the procedure, the patient sustains a cardiac arrest. It could be because of a combination of elevated digoxin or hypokalemia. But this is like one of the scenario which we may also encounter in a day-to-day clinical practice. The reason being that there is complete lack of communication between the treating physician, the consults, and the other specialists who are involved in the patient care. Communication remains the backbone of patient and provider relationship. And we have to understand that we are basically, the patient is our client and we are the providers of clinical care. And most of the times, if you go into the literature, you will see that even the health outcome has been attributed to both effective and ineffective communication. In fact, if you are good in communication, you are considered to be a health literate. And even in some textbooks and articles, you can find that there is a huge description of the communication syllabus. And most of the communication syllabus has been covered in our Communication 01 course. And today I'll be talking about the interprofessional discussion, dealing with disagreement between the clinical teams and about the treatment options. Now, if as far as your own hospital is concerned, if you see SGPGI, now, who are the core patient caregivers? They involve the faculty of a particular specialty, resident doctors, patient nurse, nurse in charges, attendants, Safai workers, and then you may encounter rarely, like sometimes you may be encountering dietitians involved with physiotherapists, some social workers. And then you look at the qualification, like with what qualification they are coming to work in this hospital. As far as the nurses are concerned, the basic qualification is either BSc nursing or general nursing. Now, it depends like from where have they acquired their nursing degree. Is it a recognized college? If it is a recognized college, if it's affiliated with some hospital, did they have adequate training? Were they trained in communication skills or not? What is their fluency in English? What is their fluency in their own language? How well they're able to communicate? So there are a lot of things which are involved. It is not just like a nurse who has been selected may be well acquainted with all the skills. Similarly, now if you look at the attendants and the Safai workers, there is no standard qualification or a selection criteria. They may be 8th pass, they may be 10th pass, they may be 12th pass, and even graduates who are not getting any jobs, they may have applied for attendants and Safai workers. So you may be lucky that you are getting some educated attendants or Safai workers, but at the same time, you may get attendants and Safai workers who have got the basic minimum qualification of just 8th. So who is a colleague? A colleague is a person by definition with whom one works in a profession or a business. So we all are colleagues working with each other. And then, so that means if you are dealing with colleagues who have got a poor education background, then you need to be trained. Then you need to be trained and you need to be given an art to acquire those skills so that you can communicate with such a staff. Now we all know that patient care is a teamwork. And if you look into the dictionary, Webster's dictionary, like how does it define communication? It writes, it is the imparting or interchange of thoughts, opinions, or information by speech, writing, or signs. Now, these are two case scenarios which I am showing you on the slide. Like one is a surgical case. Now, if you look at the theater, what is going on, there is an anesthetist, there is an anesthetist assist, there is a main surgeon, then there are some surgeon assists who may be your MCH residents, then there is a main clinical nurse who is assisting the surgeon, then there are some nurse assists, there are attendants, there are Safai workers. So there's a whole team which is working, and each member of the team needs to communicate with each other. Now, over a period of time, what happens when we work in the same environment day in and day out, again and again, we try to imbibe certain like skills of each other. We try to imbibe that what is my consultant wanting, even if he's not speaking it out, just by his gesture, we can just make out like this is what he wants. But it may not be truly easy for the residents who join newly, or for those attendants and Safai workers who have got a poor education background and they have got difficulty in analyzing that what is going on and what is the need of the hour. Similarly, if you go to a medical ward, maybe a cardiology or gastromedicine or nephrology, again, there's a whole team which participates in the round, the patient round. It is not only the physician, it is the nurse, it is the assistant, it's some residents doctors, it may be a dietitian, a physiotherapist may be involved. And if you go to some good corporate hospitals, and even if you go into the Western hospitals, you will find that even in the rounds, there are some case managers, there are some non-intensivist physicians in the ICU settings, there are some speech pathologists, language pathologists, occupational therapists. So there's a huge team which is working for the patient, and they all need to communicate with each other and communicate in the right direction for the good of the patient. So it's not an easy task. So what we need to do is we need to identify some local barriers in communication. Now, they could be the language barriers, they could be the education barriers, but what the different articles suggest that the best way is that you sit down with your own team, sit down with your nurses, with your entire paramedical staff, try to assess them and bring out some solutions and try to practice the solutions over a period of time. And then again, do an audit over a period of time that whether you are heading in the right direction or not. So you have to use some standard rounding structures. That means the rounds should have some structured rounds. It should not be a round which is haphazard. So it needs to be a structured round. It should be a multidisciplinary team. So whenever you are taking a round, you should try to involve the nurses, the paramedics, the Safai workers. They should also have the feeling that they are also involved in patient care. And there should be some explicit roles for the team members. Nurse, this is your job. The paramedic or the physiotherapist, this is your job for this patient. The Safai worker has got a designed job. So this, if the roles are defined, then it becomes easy for us to communicate amongst each other. And the best way is that once the round is being taken, we should always have a practice of a checklist. That this is my checklist, and I have been able to succeed in 80% of my checklist during the rounds today. Now, communication is a process. If you look at the communication process, there is an input. The input is through a team or a task or a leader is there. Then there is a process which needs a communication, which needs a team leadership. The team has to coordinate amongst itself, and then you come to a decision making, which gives the final output. Now, the final output is either the patient outcome or the staff outcome. Now, if you look into the recent past of the last 10 years or 15 years, the people are stressing more and more on electronic communication. Now, electronic communication is very fast, and smartphones, they have made a huge difference in communication. They are very fast. They can help you in quick decision making, and they can also help you to coordinate some procedures, procedures for the theater, some interventions which need to be done urgently on some patients. So electronic communication is now becoming the gold standard communication in hospital settings. But again, you have to understand that this is not the final and the best communication. It can be sometimes asynchronous. The messages, the phone calls, the WhatsApp calls, some videos and recordings being sent to each other, they may set the whole system into asynchrony mode. Now, WhatsApp has made a huge difference in medicine. And I just went through a recent article which has been published in 2020 in Internal and Emergency Medicine. And it says that it has made a huge world of difference as far as the patient management is concerned. And our own experience from the COVID is like over the last 10 months or so, we've had a huge usefulness of WhatsApp during the patient management because it's already a compromised atmosphere. And WhatsApp has enabled us to get the images, the chest X-rays, CT scans, videos of the patients, snapshots of the monitors, ventilators, settings. You can guide, you can have face-to-face talk, you can have video conferencing, you can talk to the patient, you can see the real scenario, how the patient is behaving. So it has made a huge difference and it is to be practiced. And if you look into the literature and you look what the European countries are doing, they are utilizing WhatsApp, they are utilizing Instagram, and there was a huge list of such apps which we are utilizing in patient care management and communication, but with a lot of drawbacks, lot of intricacies, and still it's with a word of caution. Now, some of the disadvantages which have been attributed to these apps is sometimes there can be wrong interpretation. The whole treatment may go in the wrong direction. It avoids physical visits. Now, it can avoid physical visits. And if you do not have a physical visit to the patient, sometimes it can lead to missing important clinical findings. It can delay the diagnosis and the initiation of the treatment. And some of the most important aspect is that you can lose the privacy of your institute, you can lose the privacy of your department, you can lose the privacy of the patient, and you can lose the data outside the organization, which is not desirable. So even the people are working on the privacy of the data, and they have devised some tools so that whenever you're using WhatsApp and managing the patients in your own controlled environment, the data should not go out of that particular department or that particular settings. Now, coming to doctor and doctor communication. Now, this is one of the most frequent communication which happens during patient management. Now, if you go through one of the articles written by Diane Shannon, now she is one of the major contributors to communication skills in national health system in the US, and even she has published a lot of articles in the European countries. And what she does is basically she's looking after physician to physician communication, and she has published some textbooks also between the general practitioner and the specialist. But there are a lot of components which can also be used from her textbooks and from her articles and can be used in hospital settings like ours also. And without effective and timely communication, she highlights again and again that the quality of the care always suffers. And the patients also have very bad experiences if there is incoordination, lack of proper communication among the various physicians who are taking care of a particular patient. It can result in a delay in start of appropriate treatment, delay in the diagnostics, delay in intervention, increase the length of the hospital stay, and ultimately contribute to poor outcome. Now, this is one of the structured communication which is being used in US. And this has been adopted from the US Navy system, the ISBAR structured communication. And what is ISBAR? It is one of the several frameworks for communication between the healthcare personnel in relation to patient situations. And by using this instrument, it has been followed, it has been found that it can improve the patient safety because it becomes more structured, it becomes more focused, and it can give concise communications amongst the healthcare personnel. Now, this is the ISBAR communication tools. I stands for identify, S is situation, B is background, A is assessment, and R is recommendation. Now, what is identify? Identify means it identifies those to whom the call relates. Verify that you are speaking to the person you are seeking to communicate. You have to verify, state your name, grade, and the location. Situation means why you are calling, and it allows you to state the problem. Background. it gives a summary of the information. So you need to give a background of your patient, which includes the medications, the lab results, the diagnostics, or any surgical procedures which the patient is undergone. Assessment. Summarize the relevant information which is gathered and what has happened to it over a period of time. So how it has changed over a period of time. What have been the trends of the clinical status of the patient? It may be based on like an ABC assessment. It can be based on some scoring systems, whatever you want to practice. But you need to give a first-hand assessment of your patient. And then the recommendation. It allows you to ask what you would like to happen without hinting or hoping for the right action. It may be that your recommendation is simply that I want an advice, or you may say that you can guide me for some treatment, and by the time you can give a physical attendance to the patient, you just please guide me in the right direction as far as the treatment is concerned. Now, this is just to give you an example how to communicate based on ISBAR. Identify. So identify yourself, doctor, and the patient. So it identifies you and the patient. Situation, why are you calling? I am calling because of this. The patient is tachypneic, the patient is desaturating, he's febrile, he's hypotensive, his blood pressure is dropping, his urine output has dropped over the last few hours. So this is the situation why you are calling. Background, what is the relevant background? This is an 80-year-old male admitted for this, underwent this procedure, this is this medical history, relevant surgical history, and this is what the current situation is. And then the assessment. I think this is my opinion, and if you want to add something upon it, you can add. So this is what the recommendation comes. And at the same time, you can say that, is there anything you would like me to do before you pay a physical visit to my patient? So this can save some important time. This can avoid some delay in appropriate treatment to be given to your patient. Now, this is one of the most common mode of communication which is followed in our hospital. This is a requisition form for consultation. And I just highlighted an example that just filling a consultation form does not do the needful for the patient. Like this is one of the consult which is going from CCM to pulmonary medicine. He's Mishri Lal, 79-year-old male, admitted in CCM 2, bed number 11. He's a case of pneumonia with acute exacerbation of COPD, with sepsis, with encephalopathy. And what we want is an opinion and follow-up. Now, once this consult goes to a pulmonologist, what does he understand from this consult? What is he supposed to do with the patient? Why is he required to give a consult? So if your consult is specific, optimization of bronchodilators for COPD, management of complications of COPD, what should be my antibiotic therapy? Should I continue with the steroids for this acute exacerbation, or should I stop it? So if you are specific with the consultation, what happens is that when this pulmonologist, when he comes to the ICU, he comes with a particular frame of mind that this is what my patient is, this is what I've been asked for, and this is what the consult has to be. And he prepares himself mentally for that consult. And never, if you have something which is very urgent for your patient, it is always recommended that sense of urgency for any consult only comes from a direct phone call. So you should never hesitate to give a direct phone call to any faculty, to any resident, if you want a consult from him. Now, this is another scenario. Rounds are going on. It is like our ICU. It may be any ward. And you have given a consult to some other specialty, and the resident or the faculty has come to visit your department. But you people are busy with your own patients. And what happens is, most of the times, the resident is fiddling with the whole bunch of files with the patient to whom he has come for to see the consult. He's looking after the investigations. He's just wasting unnecessary time. So what we need to do is that we should approach such a doctor who has come to visit our patient. He has spared his valuable time. We need to respect his time. So we need to approach him. We need to tell him, doctor, here is the file. I can summarize you the case for you. And this is the specific consult for which we have asked you to come here. So that becomes a good clinical and a communication skill. Now coming to the doctor and paramedic communication. As I told you, that you have to understand the education status, the clinicals, that what is the understanding of the clinical status by those paramedic staffs regarding your patient, and then you need to communicate with them. Now this is one of the article which came in one of the Sunday Times. Doctor, what did you say? So if you have to communicate with your paramedicals, first of all is they are also a part of the team. You need to realize it. Your work is incomplete. Your patient care is incomplete without them. You cannot work without the support of your paramedics. So you need to give them respect. You have to respect each and every healthcare worker who is involved in your patient care. Try to call them by their names. So and so, Mr. This gives them the respect. This gives them the sense of involvement with you and your patient. And speak the language which your paramedics understands the best. So if they are not well versed with English, it is better to converse in Hindi or whatever language they understand the best. And you need to change the perception of the nurses and the paramedics. They should not feel that they are isolated and they are just there to carry on your orders. No. You have to make them feel that they are a part of your team. They are also contributing to the patient care. So you have to increase their participation in patient management. You have to ask them, just ask one or two questions. Sister, do you have any issues with this patient? Have you understood the patient? Do you need to ask something? Are you okay? Do you need something? And this will do a world of good for the patient. Now, all verbal communication should be avoided with the paramedics. There's enough literature, there is enough WHO data to suggest that verbal communications need to be avoided, especially for the prescriptions. So if you have to communicate with them, it has to be a combination of verbal as well as a written communication. And always appreciate their work. Always appreciate. This will boost their morale and this will tell them that yes, they are also a part of the treatment given to the patient and they feel good. Now, we should implement multidisciplinary care conferences. It is not something which should be restricted only to the doctors, because we know that we are working as a team. And if we need to bridge the communication gap between the different healthcare providers, between the different stakeholders, then we need to have conferences which involve the doctors and the paramedics, and they should be made to feel that you're equally important for the growth of the hospital, for the growth of my department, and for the better care of my patients. Now, this is one of the Journal of Nursing and Care published in 2018 on effective communication between nurses and doctors and what were the barriers perceived by the nurses. So the categories were like the nurses' work readiness, lack of knowledge. So that means you need to teach and train them. Lack of competency. So if they are not good in some procedures, we should not look down upon them. We should try to teach them. Time management, theoretical versus practical training. When the new students come to us, when they have recently passed their BSc nursing or the general nursing, they may be good in theory, but they have never been exposed to the patients. They have never been exposed to sick patients. So it is your communication with them, your teaching skills, and the confidence which you instill in them at the right time that yes, you are good to me, you are good for my department, but yes, we can grow together. You have to give a good working environment to them. And at the same time, there are a lot of physicians' attributes which have been discussed in this article. The power of authority. They say that some doctors are just bossy. They never want to listen from any advice from the nurses staff or from the paramedics. And then some consultants are very loud, they're very fast, their handwriting is not legible. So these are some of the attributes which have been contributed to like poor communication between the doctors and nurses, and a lot of mood variations, handwriting issues. So these are some of the issues which we need to address whenever we are talking about communication between the nurses and the doctors. Now, there are some interventions also which have been designed to improve the communication between the nurses and physicians, and especially in the intensive care units, because this is a very like intensive care units, the patients are sick, the prescription is almost a 20 line prescription, lot of infusion pumps are going on, patients are on physiotherapy, ventilation, a lot of things are going on. So there are a lot of interventions which have been seen to improve the communication between the nurses and physicians, especially in the ICU settings. And these tools are like, you should have a daily goal sheet. So like we have the prescription charts which we have follow in our daily sheets. We have some areas which are dedicated especially to the nurses. They should have some space to write their issues. They should have some space to communicate with you. There can be a whiteboards. Each patient can have a whiteboard, and the nurse should be given the liberty to communicate with you. They can write on the board whatever issues they have with the particular patient. There should be regular workshops and training sessions for the nurses. And even the ISBA tool, which has been designed specifically for doctor to doctor communication, can also be used for doctor and nurse communication. To conclude, communication skills, we need teaching and training, and that is why this course is in place for you. It is rarely taught in undergraduates and postgraduate medical education. What is the best practice to teach is still not established. Telephone communication is supposed to be one of the best and one of the most widely practiced in clinical settings. And I went through a very interesting article way back in 2005, which suggested that we can have some scenarios, some clinical scenarios, and we can have some small skits for the doctors, and then create some scenarios and then see that how they perform during those scenarios and how they communicate with the seniors, with the juniors, and with their paramedical staff. We should perform workshops mimicking those situations. And these workshops, these courses, especially such courses like 01 courses for these communications, should not only be restricted to doctors. They should also be extended to nurses and other paramedical groups. So the key message is communication is both a science and art. The earlier we learn, the better. Communication skills should become a part of the teaching curriculum. Smart technology should be used wherever needed, but it cannot replace face-to-face communication. It cannot replace the urgent telephonic communications. And direct conversations are still the best because they can avoid adverse events. And this is a beautiful saying by George Bernard Shaw. I am the most spontaneous speaker in the world because every word, every gesture, and every retort has been carefully rehearsed. So this shows that you need a lot of teaching and training to acquire good communication skills. Thank you.